A recurring theme on this channel is cloud gaming, which is basically a way of streaming games from a remote server to your computer. This is especially useful if you don't have a powerful GPU on your device and can't get one, either because your system doesn't support it or because the current chip shortage has exploded the prices beyond your budget. Now, in the past, I've covered how to roll your own cloud gaming service using cloud providers such as AWS, Azure, and GCP, and low-latency streaming services such as Parsec, Moonlight, and NiceDCV. Check out my playlists to see those videos. Now, the problem with rolling your own servers is that it requires quite a bit of technical know-how, and that if you have a very new cloud account, you may not have a quota which allows you to request a GPU. Not to mention that it is simply too easy to forget a server running and get a huge bill at the end of the month. Now, that's where Shadow comes in. Unlike some other cloud gaming services, Shadow simply gives you a computer in the cloud on which you can run any game or other software that you like. No being restricted to only games available on the platform, like Google Stadia, and no restrictions on how the game runs. So, today, I'll be reviewing Shadow. Put simply, Shadow is a computer in the cloud which has a GPU capable of gaming. You create an account with Shadow, who then create or provision a computer just for you. You can then connect to your cloud computer from any device, such as your laptop, phone, or tablet, and even a web browser. Once connected, it acts pretty much like a normal Windows PC, allowing you to install and play your games. Unlike competitors like Google Stadia, GeForce Now, or Amazon Luna, Shadow is not limited to running only games from their library. Shadow simply gives you a cloud computer, and then it's up to you to install any games or software you like. Shadow was originally operated by a startup called Blade, which went into business in 2015. After several rounds of successful funding, things took a turn for the worse. The first problem was capacity, with users having to wait up to a year after requesting an account to get their machine. Then, in March 2021, Blade filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy in the US, as well as bankruptcy protection in Europe. Many thought the service would end there. However, Blade was subsequently acquired by cloud services provider OVH Cloud in May 2021. Some changes were made, such as the price changing to $30 a month, and the Ultra and Infinite plans, which offered higher performance systems, being discontinued. However, these changes have allowed Shadow to survive, at least for now. Shadow is currently available for $30, €30 or £30, depending on where you live, and is available in France, Belgium, Germany, Luxembourg, Switzerland, the Netherlands, the UK, and the USA. Now, I live in Malta, which is none of these countries, but I created an account in the country closest to me, which is Switzerland. Wait times vary. At the time of making this video, there is a delay between creating your account and getting your server. For servers in any of the European countries, the wait time is a very reasonable 1 hour or less. In the US, wait times vary by state. For example, users in Texas can get their machine in under an hour. However, users in Virginia will need to wait till March 1st, 2022. Now, it's December 2021 when I'm recording this, so as you can see, that is a 3-month wait time. Be sure to check their website though, as wait times are always being updated. The $30 a month gets you a machine with a GeForce GTX 1080 or equivalent, a 4-core processor with 8 threads, 12 GB of memory, 256 gigs of SSD storage, which can be upgraded, and the Windows 10 installation. It's not the most powerful of gaming systems, but it's probably much better than what your client machine has, at least in terms of GPU. Shadow recommends having at least a 15 megabit connection and offers a tool to test your connection. Their clients are available for Windows, macOS, and Linux, as well as Android, iOS, and tvOS. Streaming is supported at 4K 60 FPS, or 1080p at 144 FPS. And the client supports keyboards, mice, gaming controllers, and headsets. Once you have created your Shadow account and your system has been provisioned, you can manage your account from this dashboard, as you can see here. This is my dashboard, which is in French since I have a Swiss account. I currently have 256 gigabytes of storage, but I can add more by clicking here. As you can see, I can add storage in 256 gig increments, with the monthly surcharge being shown accordingly. Okay, that's enough background. Let's connect and game. Okay, so once you have created your Shadow account, you'll then download your Shadow client. Now the client is a bit different on Windows, Mac, Linux, and obviously Android and iOS. Here I have a Mac client, but the experience should be similar. If we go to the settings here, you can see that we can set our bitrate. As you can see right now, it's auto-detected to 34 megabits per second. We can actually do a check here to check our connection. And since I'm connected via wired Ethernet now, my bitrate should be a bit better this time. And as you can see, it's adjusted this to 50 megabits per second. We can also set the audio quality. We can enable H.265 video encoding. This is great for color accuracy if you're using this for remote productivity. And you can set your streaming preferences to prefer speed or prefer reliability. In my case, I'm going to go with speed. And then we can go to My Shadow. We can redirect USB devices to the Shadow device. We can automatically have our graphics drivers updated. And we can also test some interface stuff, etc., etc. Okay, I'm not going to really mess around with the settings. I'm just going to click Start Now. And this should connect me to my Shadow machine. And here we are, connected to my Shadow machine. Now I have Doom Eternal installed on my Shadow, obviously. This is Tech Guru after all. Let's go ahead and play some Doom Eternal. Okay, so here we are in Doom Eternal. Now one thing I'm gonna do is I'm going to go to Video and I'm going to enable Ultra Nightmare Performance Metrics, so you guys can see everything for yourselves. So here in the menu we're at 75 FPS, and by the way, just to show you my video settings, I'm running at 4K, as you can see here, and most of the quality settings are set to Ultra. I haven't gone as high as Ultra Nightmare, but I found that this gives me better performance. Now again, for comparison with my previous videos, I'm going to go to my typical Exaltia level. And you can actually see that it loads pretty fast because again, the storage on this machine is SSD. So we'll go ahead and press space. Obviously we have no RTX here since this is a GTX 1080. So I'm gonna switch to this guy. And as you can see in game, we are running at an average of 60 FPS and even a little bit higher. And this is at 4K, so that is pretty good. And there are no latency issues so far. So let's go ahead and play this. So here we are. All right, everything is nice and smooth so far. This is pretty much indistinguishable from playing locally, at least that for now. I do have mild motion blur enabled though. Okay, so let's see. All right, let's get this armor here. Nicely done. All right, and there's some other guy left. Where is he? Hello? Hello? Ah, there you are. Okay, and now we'll just kill this guy in Tech Guru tradition. Nicely done. Okay, as you can see, whilst playing that, my frame rate was very, very high, around 60 FPS. Now, you'll notice that there's this shadow icon here, okay? But right now, I can't click it because it's captured. But I'm going to go ahead and exit Doom Eternal. And as you can see from here, I can click it. You can also use the shortcut Control Alt-O or Alt-Command-O on a Mac, of course, and you'll get to this here. So as you can see, it shows you your frame rate. Obviously, now that I'm not in game, there's not much going on. The amount of bandwidth I'm using, my latency, which right now is about 50 milliseconds. Remember, guys, that I'm not in an actual supported country here. So obviously, my latency is not going to be perfect. If you're in a supported country, it's bound to be much better. There are the same settings that we saw on the client here. We can also go to the display section. Now, Shadow actually supports dual screen as well, which is particularly useful if you're using Shadow for productivity applications like video editing. And the nice thing is that it's even detected my scaling. So I have 150% fractional scaling on my Mac, and it's doing the same here on Windows. So it's pretty much seamless. It has support for controllers. I'm using keyboard and mouse at this point. It has support for microphone, and you can even forward USB peripherals. So just in case the automatic forwarding doesn't work, you can actually forward peripherals directly, especially for lag purposes. And again, here you have the same settings that we saw in the desktop client. Okay, so that was a GPU intensive game, albeit a very optimized one. I'm actually going to try Surviving Mars, which is actually more of a CPU intensive game, since the GTX 1080 is pretty decent even nowadays. But the CPU here, I mean, it's a 4-core 8-thread CPU, not exactly the latest stuff. So let's see how this runs. So I'm actually going to load a game which I used to play. I think it's this one. It's been a while. As you can see, it's taking a bit of its time to load. Okay, and here we are. So zooming out here, I have quite a lot going on. And yeah, very, very nice, very fluid. You can see the frame rate up there. It's pretty much locked at 60 FPS, no matter what I do and how much I zoom in or out. Okay, let's try zooming in a lot. And we should see, here you go. Let's actually change the speed of the game here. So we can, let's see, follow up. Yep, and it's running really, really smoothly. Okay, so it's not just a matter of having a good GPU here. I mean, the CPU is at least, oh, hello, destroyed vehicles. Yeah, something happened here. This game is super addicting. Anyway, okay, so that worked. Now, another thing I want to do is run some benchmarks. So just like I did when I rolled my own cloud gaming server, I want to run 3D Mark TimeSpy to show you what kind of performance the Shadow machine gives you. Now, previously there were different plans you could get for this, but at this point it's only the default Shadow Boost plan, which is available, which, as I mentioned, comes with a GTX 1080 and 12 gigs of RAM and a 4-core CPU. So let's see how it does on TimeSpy. Okay, so I'm going to run the TimeSpy benchmark. Remember, I'm running everything at 4K, guys. I just have 150% scaling, so everything is a bit easier to read. So it seems to be running pretty smoothly. You will notice the details in the mirrors and in the fringes of this window mirror thingy here. Remember, that's one of the things I compared when I compared Parsec, Moonlight, and Nice DCV. You can see that the Shadow client is doing a pretty good job of maintaining detail, despite obviously this being a streaming 4K game stream. No stutter so far. Oh, let's get into some faster paced action now. Yep, this is very good, as you can see. Pretty much on par with the latest version of Parsec. If not, may I dare say, a little bit better. Then again, I am on a wired connection, so it's a bit of an unfair comparison. On to graphic test 1 now. As you can see, we're getting an average of about 40 frames per second. And yes, everything looks very fluid. You'll notice the butterflies there. Okay, we're in graphics test 2 now. As you can see, the frame rate is a bit lower here. We're running at around 30-ish frames per second, but I want to see what happens when more detail comes in, which should be shortly in this particular benchmark. Yep, you can see some stuttering there. And now okay, so the frame rate has improved now. We're at 45-ish frames per second, 50. Okay, so we'll say an average of around 45, which is pretty good. And the scene looks very good. There's no stuttering, not too many jagged or pixelated edges. I mean, just that little stuttering at the beginning, but the rest seems to be going quite well at this point. Now, this next test is the CPU test, and it's the one I'm particularly interested in, since I think the weak point of the system, if there is one, would be the CPU. So let's see how well this does. No problems so far. Yes, but as you can see now, as the scene becomes more complex, we're getting 20 FPS. It's not too bad, actually. I mean, I've seen worse performance on some of the gaming servers that I've rolled. But as you can see now, as the scene gets very complicated, the frame rate has gone into slideshow territory at around 10 FPS. So yeah, just as I suspected, it's many times the case that the CPU is the bottleneck, but on this particular system, the GTX 1080 still holds up very, very well in 2022. The CPU a little less so, but it should still be pretty good for gaming. Okay, so now let's look at the benchmark results. So as you can see here, I'll just maximize it. You can see that we get a graphics score of 6909 and the CPU score of 3385. And the total time spice score is 5975, which is a little bit better than the average, which is 5828. So as you can see here, now I can simulate what games would look like. So for example, if I go to GTA 5 and I go to 1440p, you'll see that it is at 45 plus FPS, which is decent. and that 1080p would get 65 plus FPS, which is very, very playable. Something like Red Dead Redemption 2, for example, on 1080p would get 30 FPS, which is meh. 1440p would get less than that. Okay, so again, it's not a super powerful system, but it's definitely better not being able to game at all. And on most games on medium settings, you'd get pretty good stuff. Now, if we look at the monitoring, you can see here that during graphics test 1, okay, the frequencies were stable as well as 2. In the CPU test, you can see here that as the scene got more complex, obviously the CPU clock frequency pretty much hit its highest, and that's when obviously the system started to slow down as well. Just to show you the details here, you can see that we were running this at 4K at 150% DPI scaling, and if we look at some of the detailed monitoring here, you can see the frame rate, okay, for the graphics test 1 here, as well as the GPU temperature, which reached 70 degrees, and GPU load, which was basically at 100% all the time. Okay, less stable frame rate for graphics test 2, which is actually what we saw. And if this at the CPU, you can see that basically the CPU temperature started to decrease over time as the frame rate decreased. So this might indicate some sort of throttling on the case of the CPU. But anyway, those are the results of the benchmarks. Well, that's Shadow. I'm actually very happy with it. First of all, the setup process is painless, which is much different from rolling your own server. Also, unlike rolling your own server, you have a predictable, fixed monthly fee, and you can use the system for as long as you wish without having to worry about hourly charges. The stream is very good. Now, I was using a wired connection with a 500 megabit per second internet bandwidth whilst recording the video. But I also tried it from a 100 megabit per second internet connection over Wi-Fi. And apart from the occasional stutter, everything worked well. I think that for $30/euros/pounds a month, this is a pretty good deal. I mean, sure, you won't get an RTX 3080 here, but for the vast majority of games, the hardware provided allows you to game, even at 4K at 60 FPS, with medium-high to high settings, with no trouble at all. Also, bear in mind that I'm not using Shadow from a supported location, so if you're in one of the officially supported countries, your experience is bound to be better. I hope you've enjoyed my review of Shadow. Have you used it? If so, let me know about your experience down in the comments below. Oh, and whilst you're browsing there, why not give this video a like and Tech Guru a subscribe? Your likes and subscribes really help this channel to grow and motivate me to keep going. Also, if you want to support me financially like these great people on screen now, please consider subscribing to me on Patreon. Your support helps me to buy the stuff I cover in these videos. If you subscribe on Patreon, you'll get early access to videos, an exclusive chat room for patrons, the ability to suggest videos, and even technical support. Finally, remember you can also watch these videos on Odyssey if YouTube is not your thing. I hope you found this video useful, and until next time, thanks for watching.